am Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. So welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, Brian Pennie.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here. Really buzzing for this conversation.
I know, me too. So tell everybody where you're from with that fabulous accent, please.
I am from Dublin in Ireland, and lived here all my life. I didn't live here all my life. I spent a year as a child in Canada. So over your neck of the woods, we lived in Calgary, and we got deported. That's another story. But I had my 6th birthday on the airplane with the police. So that's maybe we can dig into that.
Oh my gosh. That's a story, I'm sure. I love it. So, wow. So, okay, Dublin, Ireland. I love it. You know what? It's so sad. We were going to go. My son was in school in England. He went to University of Warwick. So, so he was over there in Coventry, and we were going to go to Ireland, to England, all the UK. And because of COVID, we were not able to go. So I'm still hoping to make it over there.
Yeah, you'll get there. Make sure you come in the summer. That'd be my piece of advice. Yeah.
I grew up in Rochester, New York, which I don't know if you know that area, but a lot of snow and clouds. So I don't travel unless it's sunny. I will absolutely come in the summer for sure.
Brilliant.
So I was telling you, Brian, I said, I found you. I don't remember how long ago. It was a long time ago. And I watched you were talking about your story, and it was a video online. It must've been on YouTube. Again, I don't remember when. Maybe it was even up to a year ago. I don't know, but it moved me so much. I immediately added you to our podcast list, and I said, you must reach out to this man and get him on the show. So thank you so much for being here, because your story is powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us? So we're going to talk, of course, about self-talk today, but tell us how you got to this point where you are today. Tell us your story. You have a really powerful story. Tell us about yourself.
So there's one word that tell of why I am here today, and it's struggle, suffering, whatever word you want to use. And everyone's story starts from the moment they were born, but my struggle started from the moment I was born. So I came into the world with a condition known as intestinal malrotation. In layman's terms, my guts were twisted.
Wow.
So I came into the world like that, and I got misdiagnosed at an early age, being 2-3 weeks old. My mom, I nearly died as an infant. I wasn't getting any nutrition into my body. The doctors were saying that it was colic, lots of problems. And one day then my mom, it was our 4th visit to the hospital, and my mom says, look, I feel like he's dying in my arms. And the nurses took me, they weighed me, and I weighed half of my birth weight.
Oh my gosh.
It gets worse than that. So I was basically taken from my mother's arms, rushed to emergency surgery in the hospital, and I was given only a very small percentage chance of living. But not many people know this. I've sort of done work on this, but up until 1985, the medical practice at the time didn't believe that infants experience pain like normal adults. So it was based on weak neurological evidence from the 1940s. So I went under the knife without a general anesthetic.
What?
Yes, without a general anesthetic.
And you were how old?
I was 2 or 3 weeks old.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And any infants pre-1985 the same thing would have happened for the majority of them. It was only in 1985, I think it was an American woman found out that our infant son had heart surgery without a general anesthetic. And there was this,
Oh my God. I can't even imagine.
Horrific. It was just the medical practice. They were basing it on weak evidence from the time, and they gave infants like a muscle relaxant to stop them squirming, but there was no general anesthetic to stop the pain. And as we know now, like, I don't remember the operation, but my body remembers. And
I'm thinking the trauma.
the trauma,
My goodness, that's
unbelievable.
unbelievable. Wow.
Unreal, Michelle, unreal. And I would say I have gotten over, I have a beautiful relationship with pain and anxiety and struggles today. I really do. But when I talk about this story, I just want to give my scar a little rub. It's still, the trauma is still there just a little bit. And I've done a lot of work on this as well. But that really set me up. Like, I had complications from that surgery as well. And I cried for the first year of my life. And as we know now, I basically created associations with the outer world and the internal struggle and pain in my body. I was conditioned to fear the world. And I grew up as a very fearful, a very anxious kid. There was alcoholism in the family as well. That really added to the childhood trauma. And it was no wonder that I was looking for drugs when I hit 14 years of age. Now, what it's important to mention, I had loving parents, but they had their own struggles. So I had good parents, they had their own struggles. So the trauma, there was good moments within that as well, because I don't like to paint the picture that it was all badness and it was all horrific. There was good moments too, but I was just so afraid of people dying, of my own mind, of anxiety, those bodily sensations. And I started messing around with drugs when I was 14 years of age. But I never got the general anesthetic as a 17-year or as an infant. But when I was 17, I done heroin for the first time, and I found my anesthetic. And I remember the first time doing that, it felt like a warm, soft, lovely blanket was just wrapped around my soul and just took all of that pain away. And it was a few years before I actually got addicted at a daily level, but by the time I was 20, I was using heroin every day, and that's pretty much where I spent the next 15 years, chronically addicted to heroin.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm still thinking about you as a little baby having surgery.
I know. Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense now. Of course you would turn to drugs, of course, because your body is in so much pain. And I'm sure you never, I'm making an assumption, never had therapy or anything like that, for your pain and emotional pain, mental or even physical pain that you'd gone through. No.
None whatsoever. And it's really interesting as well. I was so disconnected from that infant as well. Like, I call that infant a baby today, right? But only up until 3 years ago, even when I was in recovery, I used to refer to the baby as an organism. And it was only when I was talking to a psychotherapist in Ireland, I was interviewing the psychotherapist, and she says, "Why do you call your infant self an organism?" And he says, "He's a baby." And I looked at her, and I was interviewing her for something separate, and we both got really emotional. It was like this connection with my inner child for the first time. Oh my God, I was so disconnected.
I just wrote that down, inner child. I wanted to ask you about that. That's I'm like, gosh, as I love to do inner child work. I love to do that with myself, with other people. I teach it. Powerful. Tell us, so that was so was that like the turning point for you? Tell us. I want to keep hearing your story. So addicted to heroin by 20, you said, and you started at 17. That lasted how many years?
15 years. So I was chronically addicted. I used heroin every day for 15 years, 20 to 35. And there was a functional element within my life as well, Michelle. Like, I had a job for a lot of that time, but in the end, it was like a noose tied around my neck, getting tighter and tighter and tighter. The drugs weren't taking the anxiety away anymore. They were making it worse. It was like a snake trying to eat its own tail.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the world was closing in around me. And it was 2013, August 2013, and I lost my job. I lost every important relationship in my life. My family had to disconnect to protect themselves. I was physically near death. I was really in a bad way. And it was at a stage in my life where I was sink or swim, live or die. And I says, right, I'm gonna have to try to get clean. Now, I was terrified of not taking drugs, Michelle. We're going to touch on self-talk. The narrative of my life was, I cannot cope with anxiety. I need drugs to survive. That was a narrative embedded within my being. I couldn't survive without that. And the thoughts of living without drugs just terrified me, but I had no choice. I was like an animal in a corner, nowhere to go. And I says, right, I'm going to try to get clean. To do it better. Again, I hadn't given up on drugs. I was going to try to do it better again. But when I tried to get clean, I couldn't get into a detox facility. And it was going to take 8 weeks, and I had to get off benzodiazepine, so Xanax and all of those Valium kind of drugs to get into the detox. And so I needed to do a detox to get into detox.
So you were taking all that plus the heroin?
Yes, method, everything.
I have a question. When did your family learn that you were addicted to heroin?
They knew probably 10 years at that stage. Yeah.
Within so you were on this for 10 years and nobody really knew?
Yeah, I was on it for 7 or 8 years without anyone knowing. But then for the last 10 years of my addiction, everyone knew. Like I was in a clinic. Yeah, I was in a clinic. Even my job knew. Like the people close to my job knew I was taking methadone, and they protected me, they enabled me in terms of that as well. So it was an interesting. I was like I was living two lives, but the worlds were colliding, and they collided hard at one stage. Yeah.
Wow. Did your family know the pain you were in, do you think?
They did, but they couldn't help me. They didn't know the extent of the internal turmoil. And to be honest, there was a lot of addiction in my family, so they were experiencing their own pain. And it was only when I got clean that a lot of people realized the pain that they were in and the struggles they had. And I can happily say that many people have found recovery on the back of my recovery, which is amazing as well. It really spreads to other people in the family.
Oh yeah.
Too.
Well, you mirrored probably all their pain, all of their work and their pain, all of that. Beautiful. So, okay. So keep going. Sorry. So I like all the details, Brian.
Yeah, not at all. I love them too. Please.
I want to know all the details.
Keep jumping in. Yeah.
So at what point did you say to yourself, okay, I've got to go? Because didn't you say that you already had gone to rehab a few times, or no?
No, never.
Okay.
Never. Yeah.
So at what point did you say to yourself, okay, I am ready I need to do the rehab? Like what convinced you? Like what was that thing that made you say, this is it, I got to do this?
So the big thing was that the drugs weren't working anymore. They were actually causing me pain. And I don't know if I knew that, but I knew drugs weren't giving me what I needed anymore. So that was one element of it. I'd also lost my job at that stage as well. So my job was a big part of funding my addiction and paying back the debts. I was in a lot of debt to the banks, money lenders. So at this stage, lost my job, 50,000 euro in debt to money lenders, drug dealers, banks. No way of getting more money. Drugs weren't working. Nothing worked. And I was just in emotional and mental turmoil, physical turmoil as well. So I had nowhere else to go. I had no choice except I never thought of suicide, but it was either suicide or treatment. And for me at that moment, it was only treatment at that stage. That was the only choice. But as I said, I couldn't get into the detox facility because in Ireland, the facility I wanted to get into didn't take people with benzodiazepine in the system because they might have a seizure. Yeah. Wow. So I decided to do a home detox of benzodiazepine, and 2 days into that detox was not only the most painful night of my life, it was also the most important. That was the catalyst that changed everything. And I woke up on my sitting room floor, blood everywhere. And what happened was I had a grand mal convulsive seizure. So, every neuron in my brain fired at the same time. I convulsed on the floor, and where the blood was coming from, I actually drove my teeth through the center of my tongue. And it was a horrific experience. Blood everywhere. My brother thought I was dead. My poor younger brother thought I was dead. Ringing my dad, crying, horrible experience. Rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, I wasn't dead. And in the hospital that evening, I woke up, and I remember this was the moment where it sort of all changed for me. I was so broken, Michelle. I really was emotionally, physically, and mentally. But I just wanted to jump out of my own skin. I wanted to escape me, get out of my head, get out of my body. But I had no way of doing it. I was just so broken in every way. And I remember leaning up on the hospital trolley, and I put my elbows on my knees, and my eyes just sort of fixated on this red fire extinguisher on the wall. And I was looking at it. I had no strength. I was just at the lost tunnel vision looking at this fire extinguisher. And I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't label it. I couldn't name it. And I was like, what is that? And I didn't, nothing made sense. And I remember looking around the rest of the room, trying to label the room, making sense of my surroundings and verbalize them. And nothing made sense. And I
Wow.
thought to myself, oh my God, you're brain damaged. Game over. No coming back from this. You're done.
Wow.
And I was waiting for that panic and anxiety that drove my whole addiction. I was waiting for that just to overwhelm me. But I remember just leaning back on the trolley saying, I give up. I can't do this anymore. You win. I'm putting up the white flag. Cannot do this. I give up. I'm done. And it was like this sense of peace came over me. It was like in that moment, it was like a sense of peace. And I believe that was the catalyst. That was the moment when I put up the white flag. And in order to move forward, I had to fall down, and I fell down. I was broken. I surrendered, and I believe it was the start of all of the changes in my life.
I wrote that word down, surrender, and I just love what you said. In order to move forward, what did you say? I had to fall down.
Yeah.
So many people with addiction that I've spoken to, they've said the same thing, and people that are not even on the show have said, I had to hit bottom.
Yeah,
really the bottom, and then you surrender.
yeah.
And then that's when everything starts to change. It's a beautiful story. It's horrifying, but it's also really beautiful. So when you're going through this detox, did you say you were in your family home?
Yeah, me and my two brothers living in the house. Yeah.
And did everybody know that you were just going to do this on your own?
Yeah, so there was no choice. So I went to my clinic. So I was a heroin addict, but I was a registered addict. So I was taking methadone as well. And I went to the methadone clinic, and they advised me not to do a home detox. But there was something screaming at me saying, I can't wait 8 weeks. I would have been dead in 8 weeks. So I just decided to do it. So my two brothers were looking after me while I done the detox and brought me to hospital. So I did have family support there, which was incredible. Yeah. So, but I didn't really have a facility to go to. But then once I got off the benzodiazepine and I done my home detox, it was a month later, I got into a heroin detox and then done a proper facilitated detox within a facility then.
Thank goodness. Wow. Okay. So you got into your detox. Then what happens next? So I love this surrender. Tell me then, continue on. I love this.
Yeah, so basically what happened was that was the most important moment, that fire extinguisher moment, that sense of surrender. And when I got into the detox, I was still taking methadone. I had to reduce the amount of methadone I was taking. And I got into a detox facility, and my strength was coming back a little bit, even though the drugs were still in me. So they were weaning me off the methadone, 5 mils every 3 days. And while I was in there, and there was a psychologist there, it was on a little farm. I'd no phone. I'd no people looking for money. It was a chance just to sit with myself again. I was given a book. It's not one of the most recommended books I'd give. It's called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It is a good book.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a really good book. But it was the first time I ever got in touch with those kind of messages. I was introduced to mindfulness, self-awareness, Buddhism, all of these concepts. And I was just sort of fascinated by this way of thinking that I'd never heard of before. And there was like this little whisper in the back of my mind saying, oh my God, Brian, you might have a life again. You might have a chance again.
Wow.
And that was sort of keeping me going. And there was like this energy was coming back into my body. I was reading about these concepts that I was mesmerized by. And it was just like this sort of, it was the start of a transformation that I was having. And even when I was getting close to like the final stages of detox, when all of the drugs were out of my system, I was physically broken. Like not broken. I had a fever. I was going through the height of an opiate withdrawal. But in the middle of the nights, I was reading these books and I was journaling, and it was some of the most powerful, profound experiences of my life. It was like I was seeing reality for the first time. And on the 8th of October 2013, that's my official first clean day. I woke up that morning, and there was just something different about the world, wonderfully different. And I remember waking up, I was the first one up for breakfast and nobody was up. And it was like the world was just beckoning me outside. So I went for a walk around the farm. It was a beautiful October, dew-soaked morning. And it was like, it's hard to describe in words because it was just so there was so much feeling in it. But it was like nature itself. It was like she was actually breathing on me. It was lovely misty morning. The birds were singing. They sounded chirpier than I'd ever heard. The colors were just so bright, and the world was just glowing. The world was just glowing. And it was just that profound moment. And I've since realized I didn't know what happened to me in that moment. And that sort of drove me on to research what I'm doing today, to do a PhD, to follow the world of psychology, to read millions of books to find out what happened to me. But it was, why did I suffer? Why don't I suffer anymore? How can I help other people? And there's lots of elements of that, but one of the biggest findings in my life was that the voice stopped, the inner narrator stopped, the negative self-talk stopped. And once that stopped, I stopped battering and pummeling myself with all of the bad emotions that go with, you're not a real man. You're only an addict. You can't cope. You're not good enough. And when the voices stopped, the emotions stopped. I changed the story of my life. I changed the narrative. And that just opened up the space for tremendous change.
So it sounds like you had this beautiful God experience that day. It's like the ego, something happened. It's like an awakening. I'm thinking of like Eckhart Tolle, how he had that awakening. It sounds like you had an awakening.
Yeah, similar to that. I say what a perspective shift and awaken. Dumb luck. I don't know, but I'd be a big Eckhart Tolle fan, and I love his work, and it really resonated with me. That splitting of the ego, like he couldn't live with himself anymore. So it was like the addiction ego disintegrated, and it just left this lovely space of just feeling sensory perceptions and just feeling the world.
Wow. So it was like on that day, your self-talk changed and the voices stopped, or what was your journey then like from that day moving forward?
Yeah, I had no idea what happened to me on that day. I just knew I felt profoundly amazing. There was so much energy. It was like, I am going to have an amazing life. There was just this energy and vibrancy just came into my life. But I just wanted to experience the world. I was meditating. I was sitting with the world. But it was really strange because I was still going through a detox. So physically, I was still struggling as well. I wasn't sleeping. So it was a mix. It wasn't like Eckhart Tolle sounded like he had this beautiful experience. Mine came on the back of physical pain still there. So it was like phases of different things. And after detox, I got into a treatment facility to really work on myself, that the essence of the treatment. And I remember doing a mindfulness meditation down there, and the guy that was guiding the meditation, he says thoughts will come in and thoughts will go out. And there was a single moment when I had this realization. It was about 6 weeks after detox. I had this realization, oh my God, my mind is so quiet. It's very still in there. And it used to be so busy. I'd never even, that was my first realization of that compulsive thinking. It was so compulsive that I couldn't see it because it was always there. I couldn't see the thinker because the thinker was me, the ego. But I had this realization, wow, those were my thoughts and they were always driving everything in my life. But now there's a stillness, and I hadn't got the words, I hadn't got the language for it at the time. I hadn't studied at the time, but I just knew there was something related to this inner thinking, this inner dialogue that had gone quiet, and I felt amazing. And I was on a mission to find out what that was.
Wow. All right. So what was it, Brian?
What was it? So I went to college straight away. I wanted to do a degree in psychology, and I went and done that thinking it was going to be all about self-talk and Buddhism and addiction and the inner voice. It's nothing got to do with that. So I landed in a world of statistics, and luckily enough, I like statistics. I found out I like statistics, and I done really well in college, but more importantly, I found some great mentors, some great therapists in there as well. And I'm sure you're aware of acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yes.
So it's a really, really good therapy. And what underpins the science that underpins acceptance and commitment therapy is a theory known as relational frame theory. And it's really a language of cognition and language and self-talk and emotions that explores the realm of this. Now, it's sort of I won't get into the weeds with relational frame theory. It's a very technical concept, but the essence of it shows us that language is a vehicle for emotion. And I think there's a quote by Hafiz that I just love. The words we speak become the house we live in.
Yes.
So if we are telling ourselves that, or the language that we have and how we see the world, whatever way we perceive it, the psychological functions and the emotions and the feelings, they travel through that world. So whatever you're saying to yourselves has such a big impact on that as well. So that is really the essence summary of what I found is, so we really need to have a language and a narrative that serves us. Be quiet, obviously, to have that stillness as much as we can, but we're not all living in Tibet. We can't all meditate for 12 hours a day. We live in cities and the real world, if you want to call it that. So we're going to have a narrative. We're going to have an identity. We're going to have elements of the ego kicking back in. So we need to have a better relationship with that as well, and have a detachment from our thoughts and feelings as well. So when they overwhelm us, or when they come along, they don't overwhelm us. So I still experience anxiety. I'm human, but I have a beautiful relationship with anxiety today because there is a detachment from the feelings and the thinking and the voice. And there's a sense of me being the observer of those things instead of those things driving me. And that was really the big answer that I found.
Yeah. So really witnessing your thoughts. I mean, we have up to 90,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah,
that are just
crazy.
rifling in and coming in without even us wanting them to come in. And talk about a little bit the practice, though, of detachment of those thoughts. You know, I'm thinking of people listening going, but how do we do that?
I know. That's the tough part.
How do you witness, you know?
How do you witness? For me, there's a couple of beautiful metaphors, and I think that's the best entry point for that. The one that really resonated with me was the clouds floating through the sky. Mm-hmm. So when I think of myself, Brian the addict, back 10 years ago, if I looked in the mirror, I thought like an anxious addict. I had thoughts like an anxious addict. I felt like an anxious addict. I looked like an anxious addict. I had bodily sensations that felt like an anxious addict. Now, Brian today looks in the mirror. He doesn't think like an anxious addict. He doesn't feel like an anxious addict, and he doesn't look like an anxious addict. It's completely different. But the same Brian inside and my eyes are looking in the mirror. And when I experience the world, the same Brian is experiencing those thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. So that could not have been who I was, because I am experiencing that now. So that was a false sense of self. It's who I thought I was. It's who I felt I was, but that was a false sense of self.
Right.
So today, I'm more in touch with my authentic self. And the metaphor that I'm talking about, it's like clouds will float through the sky. Sometimes they're dark and angry, anxious, stressful, overwhelmed. Sometimes they're light and fluffy, joyful and happy, bright clouds floating through the sky. But we are not the clouds. We are the blue sky who observes the clouds coming and going. So if you can take that observer view, that witnessing, watcher view of the thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations, you create that detachment from self. Now, you are not going to, life isn't going to be completely rosy after that. You're still going to feel difficult feelings, and you still have to sit with that. But you observe without engaging, and you create that space between the challenge that happens and your response to the situation. There's a lovely metaphor as well, another metaphor in Buddhist philosophy known as first and second darts. So first darts are the darts that life throws at us. The war in Ukraine, COVID-19, lockdowns, difficult partnerships. Maybe your kids are getting bullied, whatever that is. These are the darts that life throws at us. But the second darts are the darts we throw at ourselves: anxiety, jealousy, rage, guilt, anger. But there's a space between the first dart and the second dart. And if you create that detachment from self by being the observer of your feelings and your thoughts, you create that space and you can respond in a more rational way. And I believe that's where freedom, that's where growth truly lives, in the space between the stimulus and the response, between the first and second dart. And it's a really nice way to conceptually think about that as well.
I love that. I love the cloud analogy. I've used the cloud analogy, but I love how you said, and we are the blue sky. I love that. We're the blue sky and let the clouds. And I love this dart analogy too, because there is that space.
Yeah.
But sometimes the self-talk becomes a ruminating self-talk, and it doesn't feel like there's any space. So if someone's caught in that, what would they do?
Yeah, and I think the idea is to increase the space. And how do you increase the space? I think the fruits of mindfulness, for example, increases the space between the stimulus and the response. It's one entry point for that. Spending time in nature, exercise, it decreases your reactivity to that. Eating well, sleeping well, all of these things reduce your reactivity to the narrative, because language is a vehicle for emotion. So you need to become aware of the narrative. And I do believe awareness awareness is the catalyst for change. Once you become aware, fully aware, that's the problem. That's where change happens. But it's about implementing certain strategies in your life to be able to navigate that change. But there's one particular evidence-based strategy that I think is really, really important. And when we become stressed in any situation, like from a biological perspective, it sends a signal to the fear center of our brain, the amygdala. That sends a signal down to the sympathetic nervous system. We go into fight or flight. Our body is flooded with cortisol, and that is the stress response. Now, that is an automatic response. It's not voluntary. It's automatic. There's nothing we can do about that once the stressor comes in. But what we do have control over is our breath, and our breath is a great entry point to reduce that stress. And someone once told me, you're born with a breath and you die with a breath. It must be important. And it's interesting that it's the only voluntary entry point of where we can reduce that stress. And the research shows that if you have a longer out breath than your in breath, you are actually sending a signal to your brain that there's pressure on your heart, that we need to reduce that pressure. That's what the out breath does, and it reduces the stress levels in your body. So if you can create, it's really, really powerful. So if you create some kind of breathing technique where the out breath is shorter, or is longer, than the in breath, you reduce the amount of stress in your body. And one of the key components of the stress response is that your cognitive system shut down, and you become an emotional being, triggered being, and that's going to really trigger that ruminating self-talk. So to give yourself some control over that, for every time you catch yourself ruminating, you find yourself getting triggered, just focus on the breath. 5 breaths, longer out breath than the in breath, and you really bring down those levels, and you build awareness. And it's a really great entry point for increasing that space as well.
I love that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So longer out breath, and it doesn't have to be twice as long as the in breath, just as long as it's longer, right?
Just as long as it's longer. So what actually happens? You'd be very interested in this, Michelle. So when we breathe out, when we breathe in, the diaphragm goes down. So we've more space around our heart. So that sends a signal up to the brain saying there's no pressure on the heart, increase the pressure. So when we breathe in, the brain gets a signal, increase the pressure. That increases the stress response. When we breathe out, the diaphragm comes up. That puts pressure on the heart, which a neuron sends a signal to the brain saying, reduce the pressure, reduce the amount of pressure on the heart. And then it reduces the amount of stress, because the stress response, you're looking to fight or flee. You need energy to fight or flee. For energy, we need oxygen. For oxygen, we need to get the heart pumping. So we need to reduce the heart rate, and that by in turn then reduces the stress response. So it's a really biological, powerful mechanism. It's the best evidence-based theory on reducing stress as well through the breath.
Love that. I do. I love breathing.
I know.
Deep breathing. Funny. It's like intentional breathing. I do that throughout the day. I do like a 1 minute. I call it micro moments of peace or gratitude. And I just pause like 1 minute throughout the day. And it might be 10 minutes a day because it's only 1 minute. Who can't do that? Right.
I know.
And it changes everything on the inside.
So powerful.
So explain exactly, what is self-talk? I know what it means. but I want to know what you think it means.
Wow.
Explain it.
So many descriptions. I would say it's the monkey mind. It's the inner dialogue, the narrator of our life. It can be mindless. It can be automatic. Sometimes it can whisper to you. It's really strange. And I was chatting to a guy today, a client of mine today, and he's struggling with knocking off his phone. And I found myself being drawn to my phone lately as well, like especially with the war latest in the Ukraine, COVID latest. And it's just things that you check up on. And obviously a part of my job is around social media, advertising on social media. So if you put a post up and it's part of your career, you want to check to see if it's getting traction, and you feel like being drawn to your phone. And what I implemented a practice for him, just to say, right, to put your phone away, and then every time, interestingly, every time you feel that urge to grab your phone, take 5 deep breaths. So I was talking about that breathing technique. So to do that instead. And what he said to me only this morning, he said, I catch myself doing that, But then I say, right, I need to do the breathing technique. But he says, but there's like a whisper in the background saying, nah, forget about that. Let's just go on the phone.
Yeah.
And that's the self-talk just driving that. It's okay. It's justifying your actions, rationalizing your actions. So it's really just self-talk is the inner voice, that verbal dialogue that goes on in the background. Sometimes it screams at you. Sometimes it's like your inner critic. Sometimes it's hateful. Sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it whispers and tries to trick you and deceive you. But it's a tricky customer. It can be like the devil on your shoulder. But at the same time, we can use it as an empowering way. We can use affirmations. We can tell it, big ourselves up. We can say, you have this, you can do this. And you can use it to serve you as well. So it's really about becoming aware of your self-talk so it serves you instead of you being the master of it.
Ooh, that's beautiful. Yeah. So how do we, and I know that you just talked about the clouds. Is there another way that we can eliminate self-talk?
Yes, there really is. And I think like a belief in itself is something you tell yourself again and again and again. So lots of people struggle with, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure. Personally, for me, it was, I can't cope with anxiety. I told myself that so many times inwardly with self-talk that I believed it, and that became a belief. Mm-hmm. And these beliefs, as we all know, can become extremely limiting. It's our limiting beliefs. Yeah. And I'm sure you know the technique. It's like the ABC technique from cognitive behavioral therapy. It's so powerful because it's so simple. And I think most of life is hard, but the solution is simple. And it's crazy when we think about that, like 10 micro meditations a day, breath meditations. It's simple. Why can't we do that? And lots of the tools that are going to help us are simple techniques. And the ABC technique is the same. And it's very simple. It's like the A is the trigger, the antecedent, as we call it. And that's the trigger. The B is the behavior. Mm-hmm. Or no, sorry, the B, sorry, I'm thinking of habits formation. Sorry, the B is the belief. So the A is the adversity. Sorry, the A is the adversity. The B is the belief, and the C is the consequence. Yes. So imagine you're going to do a public talk. It's an adverse situation. Your belief is, I am terrible at public speaking. I'm going to make a holy show of myself. What's the consequence? You might have a panic attack on stage or forget your words because you're going to fight or flight.
Yes.
Let's say another person or the same person who has changed their beliefs in time. Mm-hmm. Public speaking, it's still an adverse event. They're still going to feel anxious, but their belief is, do you know what? I'm going to practice. I'm going to get better. I'm going to try to do a really good job. Do you know what? People are pretty kind. Even if I make a mess of this, they're going to want the best for me. It's not going to be the worst day in the world. So what are the consequences of that? You're not going to be as anxious. It's going to be an easier thing. So the basis of this is that when you change your beliefs, you change the consequences. So I think what we have to do is we need to challenge our beliefs, stress test the assumptions that we make about our life. So if you say, I can't cope, well, maybe you have coped with lots of things. If you're here today, you've coped with lots of things in your life. So build a wall of evidence of the beliefs that you can change, and you can do that. And by changing your beliefs, you change your internal dialogue, you change your self-talk. And by changing your self-talk, you change how you feel, you change the consequences of your actions, and ultimately change your life. So that's just a nice little simplistic tool to think about the beliefs and the narratives that you have.
I like the wall of evidence.
Yes. Yeah.
I've said that to my clients, like, wait a minute. So you've never, ever, ever in your whole entire life been fill in the blank. And they're like, well, maybe once, And I'm like, watch that absolute thinking that says we never, ever, it keeps us stuck, keeps us limited, right?
So much so.
What's the link between self-talk and emotion?
So the link between self-talk and emotion at its core. So what we find out, I'm probably going to get into the little bit of the weeds with relational frame theory here. So imagine a kid. So we're not born with language. We learn language. So imagine a child is told that's a tiger. The word tiger is a picture of a tiger. And then you say, stay away from, if you lived in Africa, let's say, stay away from tigers. Tigers are scary. So imagine then you say, stay away from strangers. Strangers are scary. But then you might hear tigers can kill you with their teeth. Oh, strangers are scary too. And then let's say they're afraid of strangers, they're afraid of tigers, and they've probably seen a picture or a video of a tiger ripping some animal apart. They probably think that strangers might do that as well. And then they might go into a room and not know someone and think, oh my God, they're a stranger. And they'll associate the fear of a tiger with a stranger of what they might be. And we learn language in that way. And it's how we're directed as kids, but with the emotions that travel through that language. So when we are given a word, we will fear, or we will have a psychological function that is attached to that word. And it just doesn't have to be emotions. Like imagine you know that gold is worth a lot of money. Gold is like a diamond. Well, you will want diamonds. Well, let's say you never heard of an opal, but you heard an opal is like a diamond. Well, you're going to want that opal because it's valuable. It's worth money. So the psychological functions have transferred through that, even though you don't really know what an opal is, you just know it's like a diamond. So that's how the values and the psychological functions can travel through language. But emotions are the very same. So if you have an emotional response to a certain word, a thing that represents that word, and you hear that something else is like that thing, when you are going to fear that word without ever having an actual experience with that thing. So that's the power of language and how emotions can travel through language.
What would you say to somebody that is, I'm thinking of somebody that might be depressed or extremely anxious, doesn't want to leave the house, especially, you think about COVID, how we got used to just being alone. It's kind of scary, for people to start leaving and getting together with people, but even just someone that's very depressed and their negative self-talk is constant. Where would someone begin today? If they're listening to this, like what would be something they can do today that will start creating a ripple effect or a change for them to get out of the place they're in?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you need to realize is that it's okay. And that's your body working how it's meant to be. Like anxiety, stress, depression, they are a signal that something is wrong. Not wrong with you, that something is wrong, something happened in your history, and that is why you are feeling that way. So it's important to recognize that the fears are validated, that it's a signal. That's why they feel like they do. So how do you get out of that loop? How do you jump out of that loop? And there's lots of little tactics. Like I talk about exercise a lot. I talk about sleep a lot. And you really cut the head off these things if you get, like, exercise is the best antidepressant that you are going to get. It's a natural antidepressant. And there's very specific mechanisms that show how powerful that is when you look at the science and the neuroscience underpinning that. But again, it's very, very difficult for someone that is really, really struggling to say, go for a run, get good sleep, eat well. You're like, they're not at that level yet. So I really think it's about talking to people and sort of being there for them. And it's really hard. Sometimes there's nothing that you can do for people, and it can be really challenging to do that thing for people. And if someone is in the depths of anxiety, the depths of depression, of how they feel, I think the best thing that they can do is just reach out to people, take a chance, reach out to somebody. People are nicer than you think. That's been my experience. And just try to talk about how you feel, because it's a cliche, but a problem talking to someone that you have the problem, you share the problem. And I just think that's really, really important, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a friend, whether it's your teddy bear. Like, talk to your teddy bear, get it out there, and you just share that to a certain extent. And that's for people that are really, really struggling. But then it's obviously on a spectrum as well. And that people maybe that are on the next level, there's lots of little tips that they can try. Like, they could think about their self-talk. They could think about trying to practice, bring some awareness into their life, go for a walk in nature, spend time in nature, try to do the things that are good. And even simple little things like pick out something very, very small that you're grateful for. Like, I think gratitude is one of the most powerful tools that you can have in your locker. And like, even if you're extremely anxious or you're extremely depressed, there maybe something in your life that even in the past, whether it was a pet you had in the past, a memory of something, to be grateful for that experience. So just really try to tap into some bit of positivity, some bit of thing you can be thankful for in your life, just to start spreading that little seed of positivity, and then try to build on that from there. But it can be really, really difficult when you're in the woods with that and you can't see the light. It can be really challenging.
It really is. And I like the idea of what you said. Sleep and exercise. I'm a sleep Nazi. Like, I covet, like I have to sleep. And I've had some sleep issues over the last few years because of adrenal fatigue and cortisol spiking and all of those kinds of things. But I haven't, you've heard of the Oura ring?
No.
Oh, you got to get Oura ring.
Oura, right.
Yeah. It measures heart, heart rate variability. It measures your
Wow.
sleep. It tells you exactly how much sleep you get, how much REM sleep, how much deep sleep. I mean, I could go off on a
Right.
tangent, but I would advise, if you're a sleep person, then yeah.
I'm big, and the app doesn't work. So I've wrote that on my hand just there. I will be getting that ring.
Yeah, an Aura, you need to get an Aura ring for sure.
Right.
But I really do believe, and I think people go, oh yeah, I just slept 5 hours tonight or 6 hours. It's like, no, we need 7 to 9 hours a night to be healthy. And during that deep sleep is when the brain is scrubbing all those toxins out. Like we need that deep sleep, and we only get that an hour or so, maybe 2 hours a night. So it's really important that we get at least 7 to 9. But with exercise, I know with some of my clients, I've shared with them that are depressed or very anxious. I'm like, listen, can you just walk 2 driveways? Like go down your street, 2 driveways and back. It might take you 3 to 5 minutes to do that, but just start there, but do it every day. Like do these little itty bitty things every single day. Make your bed every single day. Go for a walk, like these little tiny, which feels like climbing Mount Everest when you're depressed. I've been depressed. I know what that feels like. So sometimes I don't even know that I can, reach out to somebody if I'm depressed, but I can get myself out in nature. It's free. Just sit in nature because it really does change everything about how you feel about yourself. Nature is so healing to the energy field, to the mind, to the body, the spirit, all of it. And you don't have to do anything. Just go sit there in the parks or out in your backyard. So I love those ideas. One more question for you. Identify how your brain gets emotionally hijacked by your self-talk. Talk about that a little bit.
Identify that. Yeah. And I love thinking about the journey of that. Like at the end of the day, our self-talk is primarily, it's the frontal cortex. It's the newer, more rational part of our brain. And there's another area of the brain as well. It's called the default mode network. It's a number of structures within the brain. And when that mode is on, we are in autopilot. We are just, the mind is thinking away in the background, carrying all of those emotions that go with that, all of that self-talk, the inner critics, and you're stupid, you're not good enough, if that's the internal mindset that you have. So between that area of the brain, which is primarily the cortex as well, and the frontal cortex. So I often talk about external stressors and internal stressors. So your external stressor might be somebody shouts at you, or the car pulls out in front of you and it lights up the amygdala. It lights up the brain like a Christmas tree. You're in stress. But there is internal stressors, and it might be a projection into the future. Oh my God, what if we go back into lockdown? I'm not going to be able to cope. So what happens? Your projected self goes into freak out mode. You get anxious about a future that may never happen. It activates the amygdala. It creates that stress response. And then you're anxious. You are feeling stressed about something that may not even happen. And it's just, it's a statement. It's a belief. It's a projection into the future. And that can happen. Like anxiety sort of lives in the future. It's worrying and fearful about the future, whereas depression lives in the past. So if you're focusing on ruminating on missed opportunities or regrets, the relationship you should have never left, well, that is going to activate the emotion center of your brain as well, and that's going to light up that emotion center and activate the stress response as well. And I think all bodily suffering comes through that mechanism. It's the stress response, but it can cause you to be anxious, and then people that are depressed as well feel those bodily sensations too. So it's thinking about the future, it's delving into the past. So it's why meditation, it's why going for a walk in nature, it's why the breath is so critical, because they all focus on the present moment. And again, it's the space between the stimulus and response. Increase those tools to be in the present moment, because when you're in the present moment, you knock off the default mode network, you knock off that internal self-talk, and then you become more aware when it tries to creep back in and tries to pull those negative emotions with it. So really, that's why I think awareness is the key to be present, and then to catch those triggers coming back in or trying to sneak back in.
That's really good. Thank you. What piece of advice would you have, or words of wisdom, for someone that is in some sort of addiction, whether it be addiction to food or alcohol, heroin, anything? What is someone that might be listening to this, or someone might hear this and share it with a friend that is in some sort of addiction? what would you like to say to them?
Right. So what I would say, the first thing I tried to say is, and it depends on the addiction. It could be a deep addiction. If it's a deeper addiction, like with drugs, substances, it's about get the biological problem sorted out first, get the substances out of your system. So contact professionals, try to get into a detox facility, because it's not very beneficial. It will be beneficial to a degree, but if you try to work on yourself with the substances in your system, they are not going to have as big an impact. It's going to be helpful, but not as big an impact. So if it's deep substance abuse, try to get into a facility to take the substances out of the system. For people, let's say with lesser addictions, phone addictions, or let's say they're just drinking too much wine during the week or whatever that is, it's really important, like, to change that behavior. And what we tend to do is we tend to focus on the actual behavior rather than looking at the bigger picture. And any addiction is basically a bad habit, if you want to name it as a bad habit. So the example of drinking too much wine during the week, let's say you're having 4 glasses of wine a night. Well, why are you drinking that wine? And we're back to those internal stressors or external stressors. It's emotional pain. It's psychological avoidance. You are trying to escape a feeling that you don't like, and you're using that drug or that drink of wine or that food. Like, it's a reason why we call it emotional eating, retail therapy, that materialistic mindset. We are trying to escape from the present moment. So the awareness within that is really, really important. But instead of trying to focus on the actual problematic behavior, focus on the triggering event that causes that behavior. So I didn't have an addiction problem. I had an anxiety problem. I have a wonderful relationship with anxiety today, so I don't have an addiction problem. I know some people in recovery that have sorted out the substance issue, but they've never gotten under the bonnet and they still want to use that drug. So you've got to really focus on the triggering event. So if you are stressed and anxious and that's causing you to use drugs, well, or alcohol, instead of reaching for a bottle of wine, go for a run. Replace it with something more positive, and that will relieve the stress as well. So it's like replacing the habit loop with something more positive. It's like replacing a bad habit with a positive routine. And we call it the golden rule of habit change as well. So to really, really have a look at those internal stressors that are driving the problematic use. And that is really the key to getting over addictive issues.
You know what? That is what I have said for so many years. You know, people will say to me, well, it's in my lineage, it's in my genes. And that might be true. That might be true. However, then that means your ancestors, your parents, or whomever also didn't know how to manage their emotions, and they didn't know what to do with their self-talk. They didn't know what to do. So the answer to addiction, again, in Michelle Chalfant's opinion, is, like you said, I think you said, get under the bonnet.
Yeah, get under the bonnet.
Get under the bonnet.
Hood. Get under the hood.
Like that. Yeah, what's in the helmet? It's like, wait a minute. What's going on inside that's causing you to want to reach for the wine? So thank you. Okay, coming from someone that was a heroin addict, to hear you say that, it's validating, because, you know, I've had growing up, my addiction was with food. I loved, you know, I would use food to numb out. Yeah. And I know very well what it's like. It's like, gosh, it's the same. I mean, again, it wasn't heroin by any means, but it was food. And it's like, no, I've got to have that pasta. Like, get out of my way. I felt like I could strangle someone if they were in my way to get, you know, it was like, but the more I worked with my internal state and my emotions, things started to change. Things started to change, and my desire to eat went way down. Like, everything started to change with food for me, the more personal work that I did. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I love your take on that as well, Michelle. It's like, I love that. It's really driving all of that kind of stuff. And there's another piece that really jumped into my mind as well, and something you touched on earlier on. It's around the inner child work. Like, I think that's so critical. Yeah,
so
and it just really reminded me of that. And there's something that I still sort of struggled with elements. Like, I used to not be able to touch the scar on my belly only up until 3-4 years ago, even when I was in recovery. But that was another stage, another layer of work that I had to do, and that came about with the inner child. And what I do now, what I've been doing for a long time now, is I visualize that inner child. I visualize that infant who I used to call an organism. I visualize that infant. I hold him in my arms. I cradle him in my arms, and I say, I have you now. Everything is okay. I'm strong now. It's okay. You're in good shape. And it's so beautiful because like you recalibrate the memories that you have, because when you're anxious in the moment, it's not that you remember the trauma, it's in the body. The trauma lives in the body. And when you implement these kind of strategies, these visualization strategies, just some kind of magic happens in the background that the next time you recall that event, it's just lighter. The emotions aren't as powerful. And it's a really powerful technique. It's been really instrumental.
And it's not linear. You can't understand. Yeah, I love inner child work because you'll connect with that inner child and then something changes. You're not even sure what's going to change, but how you change in some way in the future. And you don't even know what day that's going to be that it changes, but everything really does change. That is some of the most powerful work. We do a lot of inner child work with the adult chair. It's powerful, powerful work. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. And again, and I also heard you say, to overcome an addiction, it's you're doing a lot of your own personal work. You're seeing a therapist, you're seeing people to help you through the trauma that you experience. You're doing inner child work. So yeah, it's not as black and white as just saying, oh yeah, just sit with your emotions. And sometimes it's that, but really it's a lot. It can be deeper than that to really overcome an addiction. So
it's more nuanced.
Thank you. This has been so great, Brian. Thank you for your vulnerability today and sharing your whole story, because it's powerful. And I really hope that the people that need to hear the show today will hear it and it helps them as well. Where can people find you?
So people can find me. The best place to go, where everything stems from, there, is the website. So it's www.brianpennie.com. So it's BRIANPENNIE, brianpennie.com. And there's lots of videos, blogs, courses, everything. My book is there. We didn't mention my book actually, so which is so the book is called Bonus Time. So I believe I was given a second chance at life and I'm living on bonus time, hence the name of the book. So if you want to go deeper into the story there, you can get everything from the website.
Love it. And is your book on Amazon as well?
It's on Amazon. Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Yeah.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much. I will add all of this to the show notes for sure and make sure that people can go there and check you out at brianpennie.com. Thank you, Brian.
And thanks so much, Michelle. I love this conversation. We could have gone down, we could have spent hours in any one direction on different topics. We really could.
I agree. We scratched this whole surface for sure.
Yeah. It was lovely though. It was a lovely conversation. I was so good meeting you. It really was. It was great to connect.
Thank you.